The private jet was cruising at 35,000 feet when the CEO stood up, pointed at the janitor, and said 4 cold words. "You're fired. Sit down." Passengers turned their heads. Executives avoided eye contact. The cabin went silent except for the hum of engines slicing through the sky. The janitor didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't even defend himself. He simply nodded, and quietly returned to his seat. But 20 minutes later, when the CEO's 8-year-old daughter collapsed in the aisle, struggling to breathe, the same janitor she had just fired became the only reason that little girl would survive. And when the child later whispered, "He saved my life," everything changed. Because sometimes the person you think is the least important in the room is the one holding the greatest strength. David Morales woke up every morning at 4:30 a.m. Not because he had to, but because he liked making his daughter breakfast before school. He was 39, a single father, and the head maintenance custodian at one of the largest tech companies in the city. His job was invisible by design. If he did it well, no one noticed him at all. He vacuumed hallways before executives arrived. He sanitized conference rooms after million-dollar meetings ended. He fixed leaks no one knew existed. But to his 10-year-old daughter Sophia, he was a hero. "Daddy fixes everything," she would proudly tell her classmates. What she didn't know was that he once had a different life. Before his wife passed away from a sudden aneurysm 5 years earlier, David had been in his final year of nursing school. He was weeks away from graduation. After her death, everything collapsed. Medical bills. Grief. Childcare. He dropped out of school to work full-time immediately. The custodian position paid quickly. No waiting. No certifications needed. He told himself he would go back one day. One day turned into years. But he never stopped studying. Late at night, after Sophia fell asleep, he would read old textbooks. Watch medical lectures online. Practice CPR techniques on a training dummy he kept in the closet. He didn't let the dream die. He just put it on pause. That morning, the company CEO, Victoria Langford, was flying to another state to secure a major acquisition deal. Several department heads were on board the private jet, along with her 8-year-old daughter, Emily, who had begged to join the trip during her school break. At the last minute, the company discovered a sanitation issue in one of the executive aircraft storage areas. David was asked to board the jet pre-departure to clean and disinfect a maintenance compartment. He finished quickly and quietly. But due to a last-minute scheduling error and tight flight clearance, the jet began taxiing before he exited. There wasn't time to stop. So the pilot received clearance to bring him along and fly him back with the return crew. Victoria Langford was not pleased. She valued efficiency, perfection, control. An unscheduled janitor on her executive flight felt like failure. As soon as she saw him seated quietly near the back, she stood up. "What is he doing here?" she demanded sharply. An assistant explained the mix-up. Victoria's jaw tightened. "This is unacceptable. You do not belong on this flight." David stood respectfully. "I apologize, ma'am. I was instructed to remain seated until landing." She didn't lower her voice. "You're fired. Sit down." The words echoed heavier than intended. Executives pretended not to hear. David slowly returned to his seat. He felt embarrassment rise in his chest. Not because he lost the job, but because he knew Sophia would ask that evening. "How was work, Daddy?" And he would have to smile and pretend everything was fine. He stared out the small oval window, watching clouds drift past. He told himself, "Stay calm. Life has hit harder than this." He didn't know the real storm was only minutes away. About 20 minutes into the flight, a small commotion broke the silence. Emily, who had been coloring quietly beside her mother, suddenly dropped her crayons. Her breathing became sharp. Fast. Shallow. Victoria turned instantly. "Emily." The little girl clutched her chest. "I can't breathe." Panic spread faster than oxygen. One executive fumbled for the flight attendant. The pilot's voice crackled from the cockpit, asking what was happening. Victoria's face drained of color. Someone do something. Emily's lips began to tint blue. Anaphylactic shock. David recognized it immediately. He was already out of his seat before anyone noticed. Does she have allergies? He asked firmly but calmly. Victoria looked at him, eyes wide. Yes, peanuts, but she didn't. She may have come into contact with residue, David said quickly. Does she carry an epinephrine injector? Victoria's hands trembled as she searched her bag. Yes, here. David took it smoothly. His hands didn't shake. Training replaced humiliation. He administered the injection precisely. Stay with me, Emily, he said gently. You're going to be okay. He positioned her properly, monitored her airway, instructed someone to alert the pilot to prepare for emergency landing. Within minutes, her breathing stabilized slightly. Color slowly returned. Victoria held her daughter, tears streaming silently down her face. The cabin was no longer filled with arrogance. It was filled with gratitude. And shock. When the plane landed for emergency medical support, paramedics confirmed what everyone already suspected. If treatment had been delayed even 2 more minutes, Emily could have suffered severe complications. Victoria stood frozen as they transferred her daughter to a stretcher. Emily weakly reached out her hand. And in a fragile whisper, she said, "He saved my life." Victoria looked at David as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a janitor. Not as an inconvenience. But as a father. As a professional. As a man who had just acted without hesitation after being humiliated. Hours later, at the hospital, Victoria approached him quietly. "I was wrong," she said. David shook his head gently. "You were scared." "No," she replied. "I was arrogant." Silence sat between them. "You're trained," she realized. "I was finishing nursing school before life changed," he answered honestly. Victoria's eyes softened. "You never stopped learning, did you?" David smiled faintly. "Some dreams don't disappear. They just wait." The next morning, the board received a different announcement than expected. David Morales was not only reinstated, he was offered full company sponsorship to complete his nursing degree, along with a new role overseeing workplace health and safety programs. Victoria also launched a scholarship fund in his name for single parents pursuing healthcare careers. But the most meaningful moment came weeks later. Sophia stood beside her father at a small ceremony inside the company headquarters. "You're going back to school?" she asked excitedly. "Yes," David said. "You fixed everything again," she grinned. He knelt to her level. "No, Mija," he whispered gently. "We fixed everything. Because the greatest lesson wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about corporate apologies. It was about this. Never measure someone by their title. Never confuse position with purpose. And never assume the quiet man in the back of the room isn't carrying knowledge that could save a life. Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one heaven placed exactly where they needed to be. And sometimes, the most powerful words you'll ever hear aren't spoken by executives. They're whispered by a child who survived. He saved my life.